Good morning, everyone. It's January 11th, 2020. I'm Eric. I'm here at Zero Hedge, and the topic and article tidbits come from Brandon Smith at altmarket.com. The war pigs are finally revealing themselves, and this is just the beginning. Now, most of you who were with me back in 2016 remember that I said Donald Trump was a Trojan horse. In fact, I gave Donald Trump the nickname Trojan Horse Trump, since he was so fond of issuing degrading nicknames to others. Trojan Horse Trump is what I called him for a while. Here we are, next election cycle, and what has happened? Well, let's get into it. In 2016, during the election campaign of Donald Trump, one of the primary factors of his popularity among conservatives was that he was one of the first candidates since Ron Paul to argue for bringing U.S. troops home and ending American involvement in various elitist fabricated wars in the Middle East. From Iraq to Afghanistan to Syria and Yemen and beyond, the neocons and neolibs, at the behest of their globalist masters, had been waging war overseas unabated for over 15 years. The time was ripe for a change, and people felt certain that if Hillary Clinton entered the White House, another 4 to 8 years of war were guaranteed. Nothing is to be gained from these wars, especially not by the average individual. The only thing to be gained is being dragged down socially and economically. And even the idea of them stealing the oil has turned into a farce, as the majority of Iraqi oil has been going to China, not the U.S. General estimates on the cost of the war stand at 5 trillion U.S. tax dollars and over 4,500 American dead, along with roughly 40,000 wounded. The only people that were benefiting from the situation were globalist and banking elites. Ever since the creation of the Federal Reserve, we've been at war, and we have not stopped. Man, the Rothschilds have certainly gotten super wealthy off the backs and blood of the American people. These banking elites and globalists, who had been clamoring to destabilize the Middle East since the day they launched their Project for a New American Century, or PNAC, truly, all wars are Baker wars, and they are. You remember Smedley Butler, right? It's funny how the politicians forget to mention this guy. The Obama administration's attempts to lure Americans into supporting open war with the Assad regime in Syria had failed. Consistent attempts by George W. Bush and Obama to increase tensions with Iran had fizzled. Americans were showing signs of fatigue, finally fed up with the lies being constructed to trick them into being complicit in the banker wars. Trump was supposed to be that breath of fresh air, and of course, like all other puppets of the globalists and bankers, his promises were empty. And you might want to keep in mind that your beloved leader, he owes Jew bankers billions of dollars. I gotta wonder, what kind of favors will billions of dollars buy you? In Brandon's article, Clinton v. Trump and the Co-option of the Liberty Movement, published before the 2016 election, I warned that Trump's rhetoric might be a grand show, and as did I, and that it could be scripted by the establishment to bring conservatives back into the Republic/neocon fold. At the time, leftist media outlet Bloomberg openly reveled in the idea that Trump might absorb and destroy the Tea Party and Liberty Movement and turn them into something far more manageable. And, of course, this has happened. This has happened. The so-called spearheads of the Liberty Movement sold their principles and their followers. They sold them out. The question was whether or not the Liberty Movement would buy into Trump completely or remain skeptical. And we know now what happened. Initially, I do not think the movement held on to its objectivity at all, and it didn't. Mike Adams, Alex Jones, Dave Hodges, Lisa Haven, Mark Dice, many of these so-called pro-freedom voices were they jumped right onto that train. Far too many people bought into Trump blindly and immediately based on misguided hopes and a desire to win against the leftists. The insane cultism of the political left didn't help matters much either. When Trump started saturating his cabinet with banking elites and globalists from the CFR, the moment he entered office, I knew without any doubt that he was a fraud. He was and is the Trojan horse I've been saying all along. Close associations with establishment swamp creatures was something he had consistently criticized Clinton and other politicians for during the campaign. But Trump was no better or different than Clinton. He was just an errand boy for the elites, for his Jewish banker masters. The singular difference was that his rhetoric was designed, and I say designed, and I agree with that word. It's perfect. Designed to appeal directly to liberty-minded conservatives. You know, there are numerous books out there on how you can win mass appeal. Public relations, Gustav Le Bon, Walter Lippmann, and let's not forget Edward Bernays. This meant that it was only a matter of time before Trump broke most of his campaign promises, including his assertions that he would bring U.S. troops home. Eventually, the mask had to come off if Trump was going to continue carrying out the agenda of his masters. And by the way, in my opinion, that mask really did come off when it came to what he thought of his voters. And that was when he said, take the guns first, due process second. Today, the mask has indeed come off. For the past 3 years, Trump has made announcements of an imminent pullback of troops in the Middle East, including the recent claims that troops would be leaving Syria. All of the announcements were followed by an increase in U.S. troop presence in the region. Consistent attempts have been made to foment renewed strife with Iran. The building up to war has been obvious, but some people on the Trump train still don't get it. The most common argument I heard when pointing out all of the inconsistencies in Trump's claims, as well as his direct links to globalists, was that he hadn't started any wars. So how can he be a globalist? And, of course, all we had to do is give it a little time, and these wishes will be carried out. One of Brandon's readers noted recently that Trump derangement syndrome actually works both ways. Leftists double down on their hatred of Trump at every opportunity, but Trump cultists double down on their support for Trump, regardless of how many promises he breaks. This has always been my biggest concern, that conservatives in the liberty movement would ultimately abandon their principles of limited government, the end to banking elites in the White House, and ending illegal wars, because they had invested themselves so completely in the Trump farce that they would be too embarrassed to admit they had been conned. And they all were conned. All of them. This is why I keep saying the best thing people can do is not participate in these elections. The best thing people can do is turn their backs on this political system. The best thing people can do is resist. Another concern is that the liberty movement would be infected by an influx of people who are neoconservative statists at their core. And of course, that happened as well. These people pretended to be liberty-minded conservatives, but when the veil is lifted, they show their true colors as the war pigs they really are. A distinction has to be made between Bush-era neocon control freaks and constitutional conservatives. There are few, if any, similarities between the two groups, but the establishment hopes that the former will devour the latter, and, of course, it is happening. They are devouring. The neocon branch is devouring the liberty-minded. I've noticed that the war pigs are out in force this past week, beating their chests, calling for more blood. By now, you know that the U.S. government assassinated an Iranian military commander. Retaliations against U.S. targets have begun, and now the Iraqi government has demanded that U.S. troops be removed from the region, to which Trump has said no and demanded billions of dollars in payment instead. A new troop surge has been initiated, and this will end in all-out war. The tit-for-tat has just begun. How do Trump cultists respond? Kill those terrorists! Does any of this sound familiar to any of you? Doesn't it sound like a repeat? Should our eyes be especially peeled right now, watching for false flags that, might justify our invasion of Iran? Many of the same people that applauded Trump's supposed opposition to the wars 3 years ago are now fanatically cheering for the beginning of perhaps the most destructive war of all. The rationalizations for this abound. Soleimani was planning attacks on U.S. targets in Iraq, they say. And this might be true, though, as usual, there is no hard proof as yet. I'm reminded of the Bush-era claims of Iraqi weapons of mass destruction. The weapons that were never found, and no proof was found that they ever existed. The only weapons Iraq had were weapons the U.S. sold them decades ago. Any government can fabricate an excuse for assassination or war for public consumption, and the Trump administration is no different. And if you're against these wars, and you openly speak out about it on Twitter, well, they ban you. Over at the Free Thought Project, there is an article called, let me see here. While banning pro-peace accounts, Twitter openly allows pedophiles to discuss raping children. Previously, the Free Thought Project had reported how a disturbing push was made to attempt to normalize pedophilia as a mainstream sexual orientation. The movement involved pedophiles rebranding themselves as minor attracted persons, with the hope that they will be accepted like the LGBTQ community. Disgustingly enough, it was somewhat effective, as multiple outlets reported it like it was totally acceptable to be sexually attracted to children. While this incident was extremely disturbing, even more worrisome is that this normalization appears to be spreading, and as some recent activity on Twitter illustrates, it's condoned by social media giants. Condoned by social media giants, pedophilia. Now, the Free Thought Project has had multiple accounts deleted by Twitter, and on the very same day, Facebook removed their accounts as well. The Free Thought Project has never once spread hatred, racism, violence, or anything that even closely relates to these repugnant topics. And, it's okay for these minor attracted persons to be spouting their perversions on these platforms. Since we reported on minor attracted persons several years ago, the terminology became so popular that it morphed into multiple categories and abbreviations. There are now no maps, which apparently are the best kind of maps, because the no means they don't want to have sex with children. That's where the pro-C maps come in. The pro-C denotes pro-contact, as in the belief that children can consent into having physical contact and sex with an adult. Children cannot consent to sex with an adult. Nonetheless, tags on Twitter now openly trend to promote this content. Case in point, hashtag map positivity. When searching this term on Twitter, one can find an entire community of minor attracted persons, both those claiming to be anti-touching as well as those claiming it's just fine and dandy to rape a child. Now, you can be anything on Twitter but pro-white, white male, heterosexual, or at least talking about these topics as a white male heterosexual. You can be anything or say anything on there if you're for killing people or that's never done anything to us, killing people who aren't evil or are able to reach our shores very easily. And you got these people like Dave Hodges and multiple others making claims that there are Iranian terror cells in this country. And, of course, these individuals, much like the mainstream media, never provide any kind of proof. It seems that they do not wish to hold themselves to the same standards they wish mainstream media to hold. The disgusting state of this country should not only disgust you, it should really be setting alarm bells off within you. If you have children, you should be really fucking worried about them. Now, what's this have to do with Donald Trump? It's like this. Donald Trump had contact with Jeffrey Epstein just like Bill Clinton. And still, Alex Jones and the rest of them, and by the way, I guess he's into tranny porn, which is pretty disgusting and non-conservative, but I digress. Anyway, you should be alarmed. These bells should be blaring within you. And if they're not, well, you're not really paying attention. Till next time, kill the state, live free.